What is your stance on the UN? How has it been? How do you think it's been in achieving its goals?
Well, since the establishment of the Treaty of the United Nations after World War II, there really hasn't been a global war. So I think its original premise as being a peacekeeping organization, it has done a job for that. However, there have been minor wars, surrogate wars that have broken out since the big war. I think when on paper everything works really well with the United Nations, there are countries that don't follow the recommendations of the United Nations, as well as member nations of the UN that don't follow what the UN protocols are. So, it's kind of a body without any kind of true enforcement method. Yay, as far as keeping peace, it's done its job, but it's a very sketchy peace at best.
What do you think of the UN peacekeepers themselves, like the actual blue helmet, blue beret troops?
God, I wouldn't want that job. I think it's a really tough thing to do. As far as being on the ground as soldiers, I'm sure they're doing what they need to do. They're in situations where they're unarmed. They're in a foreign land, not wanted usually there. There have been terrible atrocities that have happened recently, since World War II, where, peacekeepers maybe could have stopped part of the genocide or the massacres or, what regime rulers, leaders have done. They're only as effective as the country they're in. So, to me, I wouldn't want their job.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I know it's not a good answer, but it's the best answer I can give.
It's a pretty good answer. What have you heard about recent human rights abuses by the UN itself?
I heard there was that guy that got busted, I think for sex trafficking or something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think in the Middle East, if I'm correct on that. Hey, come on in, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, Trevor. Yeah, I've heard about that.
All right.
I think that, in a situation like a country that's in the middle of a civil war where, it's kind of lawless, you do have problems. It's very hard to keep track of people. And I'll tell you what, every group's got a bad egg. It doesn't mean that all peacekeepers are, sex offenders or violators of power, of their power.
When usually addressed with these concerns, the UN will usually evade the question or not admit to it. So why would you think that is?
God, politics. To be a member of the United Nations as a ambassador to the UN or, statesman of some kind, that usually is, the highest level that a diplomat's going to go. Usually they're, connected in some way to the families of the country. There's a lot of politics that are involved. And anytime you've got politics involved, you've got cover-up. And you've got money to do it. Sorry, I don't know.
When these officials and offenders are usually prosecuted, they're sent back to their home country.
Yep, because of... Oh, go ahead.
Why do you think these countries really just not refuse, but just kind of mostly ignore it?
You mean why do they send them back?
They don't really
diplomatic immunity.
They really don't prosecute them.
Right. It's part of the diplomatic community. It's part of the mindset that we've had for 50, 60 years now. It's always, like I said, these are diplomats. These are princes' sons and daughters, and these are powerful people that, do you want to be the guy prosecuting the next Sultan of Brunei? Once again, it's politics.
Back to human rights abuses. Have you ever heard of the phrase, it has to do with the Congo, it's called the $1 girls?
God, no. But I can imagine what that means.
I guess I don't have to elaborate.
Were they being sold? Was that
they weren't being
linked
sold.
To the UN?
They would act as prostitutes, and they would be given just $1, which, in the Congo is a lot of money, but...
Doesn't matter.
Still, it's...
Yeah, you don't sell yourself.
Yeah. What UN scandals are you familiar with, and what do you know about them?
I can't argue to specifically say by name any UN scandal. Oh God, I'd have a hard time saying that, I think probably one of the greatest things I remember when you talk about rocky relationships would be the UN inspectors in Iraq, pre-2003 when we went in and bombed the country. We were told that they couldn't get in, couldn't inspect, weren't allowed into the facilities. Yet they had found evidence of weapons, mass destruction, and they didn't, and the president said they did. I mean, to me, that was kind of one of those, either the inspectors aren't being allowed to do what they need to do, or the information's not being given, communicated to them. I think their information can be manipulated to allow for political action from companies that or countries that are members of the UN. For example, how America used the lack of intervention or lack of inspections as a mode to or an excuse to invade the country. To me, I see that often. You see that with Syria. You've seen that with Egypt. Those are the scandals that I'm more familiar with. I don't know if you'd even call them scandals, just ineptitude.
Have you ever heard about the UN Oil for Food program?
Oh, God, now that you mention it. That was under Clinton, wasn't it? Oil for Food?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, once again, you're talking about politics. And I think when you get down to looking at what the reasons or the rationale or the role of the United Nations is, they're political actors. They follow a political agenda.
Adam White here. Please report to the attendance office.
All right, well, the reason I ask about that program is because the man who was in charge of it and several other officials were charged with bribery and extortion because they had been taking the money from these countries.
So how were they using their UN official status to embezzle?
Well, see, they were the people in charge of exchanging the oil for money and the money for food and other supplies that they would supply to that country, and they were taking part of that money for themselves.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment?
Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what you're trying to allude to is that there is no oversight of these inspectors or these diplomats when they are inside the country representing a country, that they're allowed to kind of carte blanche as far as laws go. Is that what you're...
Oh, no, I'm just trying to bring to light, well, not bring to light because they brought to light, but just further talk about these issues that start at the bottom with these peacekeepers. I don't want to call it the bottom because they're still important officials.
Oh, yeah.
But,
yeah. But it is, that's the bottom
guys
of the
all
triangle.
the way at the top. So that's the reason why I asked.
The fish rots from the head down. So it must have been corrupt to begin with.
Do you have any criticisms or further praise you could give to the UN?
It's like I said, at least it's a diplomatic body that does its best to try to keep peace. However, not every country is a member of the United Nations, and there is an agenda to the United Nations. I mean, you can argue that when you talk about the voting bloc members of the General Assembly, they have a particular agenda, whether it be Russia, the United States, China. You have
The 5 members.
Yeah, the bloc, which it never rotates. They have veto power, unanimous veto power. There's, sometimes people see, for example, Israel is represented within the United Nations, and the Palestinians just got representation. Well, geez, Palestinians have been a country, Palestine's been a country for quite some time. It's just not recognized as a country by another country.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I know the UN doesn't operate with terrorist organizations or factions within a country that might not use peacekeeping methods. Well, when your regime is corrupt and you have to revolt, who do you get recognized by? For example, the revolutionaries within Syria. I mean, if you're telling me that Assad's regime is corrupt, but yet Syria is represented in the United Nations, how do these people get a voice? And if the vehicle is through a political committee, a peacekeeping committee, why not recognize that organization and try to work with them when it comes to keeping peace within their country? But no, they only recognize sovereign actors, which would be, the United States.
Another issue I would say would be a pretty big problem. Those five
Yeah, the veto
nations
bloc.
that are able to veto, they're also in the top 7 arms exporting countries.
Yeah, it's profitable to have war. It's profitable to keep peace. It's profitable.
Why do you think these issues are so rarely talked about, even though
Politics.
obviously they're important? But
politics.
on the national news, we find out more about celebrities instead of things that are happening.
That's because it's what the
concerning
masses are.
these
That's what
issues.
they want the masses to have. I mean, we are truly sheep. We buy lock, stock, and barrel what we're told. God forbid we think for ourselves. The United Nations is cumbersome. World history is cumbersome. People don't care about it. It's a lot easier to talk about twerking and figure out what twerking is than it is talk about Kofi Annan's treatise on post-apartheid government in South Africa. You know, it's not. It's sexier to look at celebrities than it is to look at international relations.
All right, and a final easy question is, why do you think these issues are important, and why do you say these students in here should know more about them?
Because I don't like being a sheep,
Good answer.
and I would hope they don't either.
Good answer.
There you go.
All right, thank you.